There's several people that you meet in your life that you just know they're so different. I mean, they've just got it. Mutt Lange, Taylor Swift, my friend Ryan Tedder with One Republic, they all have this common denominator of being unbelievably focused. You're at the top of your game and you're still as hungry as what you were the very first day.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Today's episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is sponsored by Roswell Pro Audio, maker of handcrafted microphones in California. Inspired design and impeccable attention to detail will help you capture a gorgeous vintage sound without the vintage price tag. Check out their beautiful line of microphones at roswellproaudio.com. You may already know that using true analog gear is one of the best ways to create a great record. Yet increasingly, we live in a digital world, recording and mixing inside the computer. So what if you could have the best of both worlds? Tou Audio Manufacture is bridging the analog-digital divide by creating high-end analog gear like the Schwerkraftmaschine compressor and the Raumzeitmaschine reverb, whose knobs you can control remotely using a plugin in your DAW. Or their many analog units like the Cream bus compressor with mastering EQ, or the Veritube recording channel that let you save your settings using a custom recall sheet plugin, offering a complete line of pro audio gear from compressors to EQs to reverbs and beyond. Now you can get a pro analog sound while benefiting from the power of digital. Let your DAW help you move your knobs so that your music can move you. Click the link in the show notes to learn more about Tou Audio Manufacture. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Michael Cronin, who has never once had a hit record, or for that matter, even recorded one himself, but nevertheless has played an important role in the creation of hundreds of millions of records through his famous designs for over 200 world-class recording studios all around the globe. Michael found his calling early on, bringing his love for fine restoration of landmark buildings together with recorded music by starting out restoring a 19th century London church as a modern recording studio for the Eurythmics in 1984. He then went on to work with acclaimed studio designer Tom Hidley, as well as creating his own company, Michael Cronin Acoustic Construction, in 1997, and has been involved in the building process of scores of world-class, world-famous recording facilities, including Guillermo Tell and MEGA in Paris, France, the renovation of MOSFILM in Moscow, Russia, BOP Studio Bophuthatswana, how do I say that?
Bophuthatswana.
How do I say it?
Bophuthatswana.
Wow, Bophuthatswana, South Africa. That's a really cool facility. We got to talk about that one too. The tracking room right here in Nashville, Ocean Way, Blackbird Studios and Masterfonics, all in Nashville, Tennessee. Capri Digital in Capri, Italy, and even producer Mutt Lange's famed hideaway studio, Sully Sound, in Tou de Pays, Switzerland. In addition, Michael has been a pioneer in designing and building educational recording facilities, such as the multi-studio complexes he has done in New York City, Miami, and Atlanta for SAE, the world's largest multimedia academy. He has also contributed his skills to culturally significant facilities, including the Archivist Mastering Room at the Country Music Hall of Fame and acoustical consulting work for the Songwriters Hall of Fame, both in Nashville, Tennessee. He's also one of the most sought-after designers and builders of advanced high-end home theaters in the U.S. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once famously said that, quote, music is liquid architecture and architecture is frozen music, quote. And actually, I've said that myself about my own transition from architecture into music. Years ago, after finishing architecture school, I decided to pursue the art of recording music instead. And I'm thrilled to talk with our guest today to learn more about the intersection of frozen music and liquid architecture. Thank you again to Mark Rubel of Blackbird Academy for the introduction. Mark, you rock, man. Thank you for bringing so many great people on this podcast. Please welcome Michael Cronin to Recording Studio Rockstars. Michael, thank you for hearing my long-winded intro. Are you ready to rock?
I'm ready. Let's get it on.
All right.
Thanks, Lee.
Let's get it on. I'm going to refrain from, I have a habit of trying to do fake British accents for some reason. It's like an American thing or it's a me thing. So I don't know. Let me know if you want me to refrain from that in the middle of our interview. Do you have an American accent that you bust into every once in a while?
Now and again, just growing up, in London and, my parents are actually from Ireland. So, in Ireland, everyone talks 1,000 miles an hour. So coming here, I like to say, if you've got to slow it down a little bit,
Well, groovy. So I've given an introduction, which was long-winded, but tell us a little bit more in your own words about how you got into this stuff. I know you've done a lot of fascinating things and started out with the Eurythmics and all.
Yeah, I got a different story, I guess. I grew up in London, between London and Ireland, really. I spent a lot of time, went to school in London, but spent most of vacations, holiday times on a farm in Ireland. So, I got a lot of my love of music there and the times growing up in London, being really in the back end of the pop scene and then the electronic scene in London and the house music scene. And, I got into it through, I left school when I was 16. And actually, my family were in construction. So my background really started up in construction. I went in and done a 4-year program when I'd done my sitting in guilds and studying different types of restoration work, mostly cabinetry, fine mill work, and restoration work. And actually, one of the guys that I grew up with, his name's John Smith, and we've known each other since we've been on Solids all our life, man. And John still works with me now, and I'm 53 years old, so we've been around a long time, And we worked together we had a little partnership in London, a little company. And when we were 19, we took a project in North London, an area called Crouch End, and it just said to restore this church, and we thought, well, we'll take that. It's like few miles from our house, and we'll see what it's about. And when we went there, it turned out to be for the Eurythmics, who was a huge fan. Yeah, man. And so it was a church, old church from the 1800s, and they bought it, and we worked on this project for at least 2 years, and that was maybe my first introduction into the acoustic world. And I'll be honest, I've got a natural ability for it. I'm dyslexic, so, I'm a numbers person. It's, that's my English, I guess. It's, it comes natural to me. And
now, what's the relation between dyslexia and numbers?
Well, you
have to read everything twice? Or?
Yeah, you have to read everything 3 or 4 times, actually. But what you see it's like the Matrix, you see in sequence of numbers. So it's very three-dimensional, the way you perceive things and you look at things, and really in life. I mean, a lot of CEOs of companies, a lot of architects, a lot of people in design, creativity have dyslexia. And
I probably do.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's the best gift that could ever happen to me. My son, he has dyslexia. He's at Lehigh University doing a double major in civil engineering and in business. So, that's anything to do with maths, physics, you're golden, and so I guess for me, having that construction side of it and then getting into the science of it, for some reason it clicked with me pretty early on. And so we worked there. I worked on this project for a couple of years and, fell in love with doing this work. And still, I was actually there at, it's called The Church. And it's still there. The studio's still rocking.
Name, right?
That's right. Perfect name, coincidentally. But the studio's still rocking, still going. David Gray owned it for a while after Dave and Annie sold it. And I can't remember the guy who owns it now, but he's the guy who's been doing all the production work for Adele and stuff like that. So,
right on.
And what happened, I mean, just really serendipitously, we were looking for some when we were moving up in that project for another project to take on, and we ended up hooking up with a company, I mean, just by pure coincidence, that built studios for probably the most famous acoustician ever, Tom Hidley. And he was based out of Switzerland and Hawaii, his corporations were. And this company, we filled in all this paperwork, sent it off. And I mean, this is just the way life is,
Yeah.
And about 6 weeks later, we got a courtesy call saying they weren't going to hire us. And, really, I was just shooting the breeze with the owner of this construction company that was based in England. And he was asking us where we were working, and I explained to him where he were. And he just said, hey, that's what we do. Our company is called Sound Care Construction. And we build recording and film facilities. He said, and I've got to hire you. So he hired us.
And this is Tom Hidley's company?
It was a company that Tom used in England to do all their construction. Tom designed everything, and he used this company. He really liked using British companies purely because, at that time, there was just a long apprenticeship. So people, you could get really highly skilled people, that had gone through the programs, like 4-year programs. And so I ended up working for this company. I got, first project I worked with them. It was the first 20 hertz room to be built in the world. Simultaneously, there was one here in Nashville called Masterfonics Mix Room.
Right.
And the other one was Studio de Pays, which is in Paris.
Now, I remember the tracking room, which you were
Yeah,
also
we built
part of.
that 23 years ago.
Was that after the Masterfonics mix room?
Yes, that was after.
And I remember the tracking room was because I went in there and I got to see it, and I was told this goes down flat to 20 hertz.
Yeah. So the first ones were, here.
Don't walk behind the console.
That's right. Yeah, that was when we really started, dabbling in some subsonic and infrasonic projects. But we had done some before that. But the first actual room to go online was the mix room here. And that was in 1986. And like I said, I was in Paris, and we built, plus the Clichy, we built a Studio de Pays there. And that ended up being one of 45 facilities that we built in France over a period of 4 years.
Wow, that's a lot of building.
So we built a lot. And so
you were, I've always heard, I remember when I was in architecture school, they described it as that's the building where the lights are always on. And it was, this implication that if you go into architecture, you're going to be working around the clock. And then I was like, well, architecture is not for me. I really want to do music. Of course, music is the business where you're working around the clock too.
Yeah.
But was that a pretty good description of those years for you? Were you just working all the time, or what?
Yeah, you were working all the time because, when it was unusual really for me, because really I went from learning a couple of years with Eurythmics and then getting to work for the most prolific designer. So, we went to doing the best facilities all over the world.
Right.
So I never worked in England and have not since. I was 21 years old and I'm 53 now. So,
wow. So it really is a testament to, the approach to a career that says, if you can land with both feet in, at a great firm or something like that, in this case, a design firm, or that's how you would describe it, right? You could just really kind of catapult from there.
Yeah, and that's really what
versus the kind of another way of sort of like doing this home studio thing like I do, where it's sort of like you're going to just figure do everything from ground zero yourself. But it's cool to hear both. It's cool to hear that story.
So I kind of got into it one way, and then just by pure coincidence meeting another company that's all that they'd done. And I worked with this company, Soundcare, for a couple of years, and then the designer that asked me to come and work for him directly. And so I ended up doing that, and it was basically, he said, look, I'll teach you what I know if you stick with me. I believe we're going to have a great working relationship and a great career for you. And it's worked out.
That's great. Well, before we started, you and I were discussing, the process of finding great people to work with. And you were talking about the value of when you work with somebody and you do great work with them, you sort of build a trusting relationship, and then everything just kind of flows out from there. They might, ask you to be responsible for the recording studio or the barn or the, any other part of the
Correct.
of a building. Maybe if you want to comment a little bit about that, about this, the importance of building relationships and trust, and what advice do you have for people regarding that?
Well, it's like, anything in life, everything is based on trust. I don't care what it is, and if you get into a position where I was, honest guy who works hard, basically, and you're a pretty smart guy, and you have the access to great people around you, you got to think back in the 80s, and you said to someone, hey, do you want to come to Italy and work with me here, or go to France, or go to Spain, or go to Germany, go to Switzerland? There's not many people turned it down, to be honest with you.
Right.
So we, I ended up, having this great team around me, and, we really all propelled each other.
And I'm going to guess that you weren't married with kids yet at that point?
No, not at that time. And I, down the road, yes. But at that time, no, we were working, constantly. That was part of the gig. It's like, so you need people who are as focused as you, who are as driven as you, and as skilled as you, and, if not better, but, to keep everything going and
get ready to go wherever. So I just had lunch with an intern, and we were just talking, and I was giving, trying to share advice with him too. And we were just talking about that topic of, I was reminding him of, like, when you're in your 20s, that is the time.
Yeah, you learn in your 20s, you earn in your 30s.
Right, here we go. Learn in your 20s, earn in your 30s.
And, you just have good ears, man.
That's our inspirational quote for the podcast today.
Yeah, there you go. And it's like, I talk at different schools sometimes. It's not that I'm a great public speaker, but I do enjoy trying to help people, give them a little bit of direction. I'm a parent, and I think really the best advice I've ever given my kids, they're not small, they're 22 and 23, and I have another stepson who's 23 and another one who's 20, is, if you find something you really love, you'll never work a day in your life.
I like that.
It's true, because you get so good at it and you're so into it, and, you don't get stuck down in the weeds. You really learn, a different thought process.
I feel fortunate to realize that I've been doing that myself as well. I think it's important to also acknowledge that you may never work a day in your life, but it doesn't mean that you won't still get tired and be ready to quit for the day and stuff like that. But, I don't know. I remember hearing an interview with somebody years ago in a magazine, and they were a producer, and they had been working, and then they tried to take a year off or something like that. And he said or take a month off for a vacation, even, whatever it was. And he just said he just quickly got sick of it, and he just wanted to be back in the studio. And I feel like it's true for me too. I'll do the music, I'll do the podcasts, I do, this kind of online stuff, and all these things I'm interested in. And I might get away from it or finish something, but when I've got my free time, I'm pretty quickly drawn back to wanting to do it again because I love doing it.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. Yeah. In my world, I'm a delegator. I trust people, and, if you work together, the team I have with me have been with me, from 32 years to 12 years. That's the newest person's been 12 years and up to 30. So we, we all know each other. We know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, and, we know, we're a good team.
Now,
we go out.
Did you start out with an attitude of feeling like you needed to do everything yourself? And did you have a point at which you realized the power of delegating? And I did when I got thrown in the deep end. I was like, oh my God,
because I said, I went from working with Annie and Dave, and then working with Tom, where you're just doing these insane projects all over the world, and you get to learn, everything from, getting sent a set of plans and, going through, doing the purchasing, the shipping, setting up the crews. And I guess I got this from Tom, really. I mean, Tom's been, outside of my mother, my biggest mentor in my life, without a doubt. And the biggest influence, male influence in my life. And it was basically, hey, this is it. You've got the skills. And we go out, wherever it is in the world. I'd bring a team out there, and he'd come out at the beginning and he'd just say, hey, give me a call when you're done. And we'd go and he'd come out and commission the rooms. And so, at the beginning, it was like, it's a lot of trust. And so you have to be able to delegate. And, like I said, I think I got really good at it and had a lot of really good people around me, and I still do. And that's who I rely on,
Well, when I think about going from architecture into music, as it makes sense for me to have tried to do, I've tried to draw some analogies. Well, there must be some connection. I didn't just take, a left turn at Albuquerque and just drop everything I did before. But I think that one of the things that I carried over that I feel like was a learning skill in architecture and studying design was the skills of problem solving. Mm-hmm. Like you begin to look at things and it's a problem and it needs to be solved. And it's, whether you're sculpting, using clay and cardboard and foam core, a lot of foam core back then.
No, I mean, the different forms of art, they're both in your head. You're either with your eyes or your ears.
Yeah. And it's like, and in architecture, it's solving very human problems. So it's like a person-sized person needs to be able to get from here to here, and they need to do these things, and they need to then go over here. And, what happens when they need to go to the bathroom? And in music, you're solving the human experience of listening to a song. But maybe talk a little bit about what kind of stuff you have to solve when it comes to acoustical design and a studio space.
Well, they're all different, and I work with people from all walks of life and, at different levels in their careers, and corporations, but they're all exactly the same to me. A lot of the biggest opportunities that I've gotten is from working with artists that, helping them along the way in their careers. And, they take you along for the ride. You end up not just trust, but you end up with a friendship. And, for me, that's just been really the biggest asset. I had a company in Europe, and then my company here in the US, I've had it for 24 years. And, I'll be honest, I'm proud. In 24 years, I've never been fired. That's a good thing.
That's pretty amazing, because I think about record producers, and an artist might not always stick with the same record producers every record.
That's right. But, mistakes, in what we do, I learned early on, they're extremely costly.
Right.
So, really know what you know, and anything outside of that, you bring people in, and that can be easier for someone like me because, I know my limitations and I know the expectations of different clients, if you want to build a small recording studio, it doesn't matter who you are, the fundamentals are still the same.
Right. Fundamentals of sound and audio.
They're all the same. It's like, isolation. If you want to build a home studio, if you want to piss the neighbors off, you need isolation. That's the way that goes. It's the same as like Blackbird.
Yeah.
It's all a relative scale, but it has the same fundamentals. The most common things I've seen, I guess, in my career earlier on, although I was fortunate because I worked with such a brilliant designer for over 20 years. So we had a very unique relationship. I had my own.
This is Tom.
Yeah.
And maybe we should mention some of the places that you worked with Tom, because I know on the list here we're talking about BOP Studios and Rockstars. I put a YouTube playlist together, which you can check out. Michael shared some of the videos that sort of walk through his studio designs, including BOP Studios. It was a sound on sound video.
Yep, that's right.
Just really, what an amazing looking
And there's
space.
actually a video, and I'm not sure how that ended up online,
And
like
do
most things.
people call it BOP Studios?
Yeah, BOP.
Okay.
Yeah. It was Bophuthatswana, which was the history of BOP is Bophuthatswana, which is or was the first black self-rule homeland in South Africa.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
That's how that came about. But I'll start really from 85, 86 when I met Tom. Like I said, I ended up working with him. I built about 45 facilities in France, about 10 in Spain. And, like at that time in Europe, in Western Europe, because, for example, in Spain, you have 5 dialects. So any TV show, any film, anything that's broadcast has to be dubbed into all the dialects. Like you can't
just for Spain.
Yeah, just for Spain. So, wow. It's not, to piss each other off, everything. So there is actually a bit large overdub and post-production business there. It's still like that. And in France, people think of the 60s when the Stones used to go to the south of France and people like that. And I mean, one was a beautiful place to work. 2, it was a non-union city, or I think the country was like that too, where, so you had a very high class of musicians, to pull from. And, they had great facilities. It was just, more destinational. And it goes back again to a lot of the stuff with Westlake Audio, which was actually Tom's first company. He built 600 studios around the world with Westlake, very similar rooms. And so people,
right.
What they really started doing, a lot of bands, they made track in London, mix in, overdub in New York, mix in LA, go to Japan, go here. And so there was continuity. He was the first person who really produced a really great sounding room like McDonald's and just kept building them.
That's
they
amazing.
Worked, and there was no competition at that level. So, and that's what people wanted, that people wanted, to be able to go in and know what they're getting.
Right.
It's like the restaurant business,
I've learned that that's one of the most valuable things in the studio when you're making a record. And just like your clients who keep hiring you and over again because they trust you, is for me, making a record in the studio is removing the sense of doubt as soon as you can.
Yep. Has
so
to translate.
Doubt is the killer. It's the creative killer. It
yep.
screws everything up.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that politely.
No, sure. That's what it is, man. No, I mean, continuity is good in any form of life. People want to feel safe and,
Well, it's just hard enough to come up with a good idea in the studio, let alone, injecting a huge, infusion of doubt into your session. So to build all these rooms meant that an artist could go from, they could travel somewhere, do more overdubs there, mix the record somewhere else or whatever. And every time you pull it up, it sounds familiar to you and it sounds the same. And, that was always a hard thing to do, just moving the tape from one tape machine to another too, and
sure.
realigning it and having it come back up. But, what pops into my head now is how much we take that for granted, that I can record something in Pro Tools and just email somebody else the session across the world.
Yeah.
And it won't come, we should talk more about this, about how it won't come out of the speakers sounding exactly the same, but at least you can count on the computer to sort of interpret the session and, spit out a left and a right channel that are similar to where you left off somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, and things have evolved and changed and so much, especially in the last 15 years. And I always think change is good, to be honest. As long as you're moving in one direction, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The streaming industry and the record labels, the way that they're structured now are so different than what they were, where you had a label and they went out and they found these artists and they gave them, 3 or 4 albums just to get them kickstarted, and everyone was making a bunch of money, it seemed like. And then along came Napster and changed the world of file sharing. And then, someone like Apple just dominating the world with iTunes. But that's been a great thing too. It's not sonically been a great thing, but I still
what I find I'm very happy about is most of the artists that I work with, they don't have the mentality that people are going to listen to these over, on an iPod or, they still want to record something and that's broadband, full bandwidth. Because yes, everything, it's like ADATs, everything has a shelf life. After a while, people are like, man, that's right. Now it's like vinyl's back in, vinyl's vogue,
And you also don't know what's coming next. So it's possible, we got used to an MP3 streaming because that made it convenient to deliver music, an infinite library of music to a pair of earbuds, wherever you are. But we don't know. Down the road, you might be able to do the very same thing with, higher resolution than a vinyl record to those earbuds. Sure. And listen to a record anywhere. So
I mean, just look at a car. The engineering that are in the car industry and the truck industry is phenomenal. I would just there's a company here called G7, and they're a marketing company. Very good friends of mine. They work with every major artist there is, and they're in the branding business. And one of their companies, they're actually based out of Detroit. They've been around about 120 years. The beginning, yes, it's really a really great company. And one of the, they do big exhibitions, like the Detroit Car Show would be there.
That's I was going to say, it must have started from auto. Yeah,
from the auto industry. So I went to a thing quite recently over at RCA Studio AE, and for Ram Truck, who's one of their clients, and Ram, they hired Dave Cobb, who's a very good friend of mine. I'll get back with him. I've done a lot of work with Dave recently, but Dave designed the new sound system for Ram, and it's incredible. I mean,
interesting. So they're designing the sound system to go in the truck itself.
Yes, and it's the engineering in it is breathtaking. So everyone thinks you can limit the bandwidth, you can limit this, you can limit that. Nobody's going to hear that anyway. It's not true. I mean, no one's going to hear in a pair of earbuds, but
all those guys driving, 4x4 trucks around town will hear it for sure.
Yeah, and at home, that's what we build a lot. Obviously, studios, and we do a lot of homes, and the emphasis on the AV aspect is huge. I mean, I can't think of a job that you go to that somewhere along the line doesn't have some component that has an audio video component. Yeah. From the age of 5, if I've asked my kids something, they went, look on YouTube, Dad.
Right.
Anything you want to do, you want to learn, go to YouTube.
I know, it's pretty amazing. It's an incredible time. I mean, people will be listening to this podcast on, phones and computers and earbuds and, car speakers all over the world. And I do get emails, and thank you for sending them in, rock stars. I get emails regularly now from you guys who have said that hearing all our guests on the show and being able to just listen in and learn stuff has been, life-changing for you and making records. So that's pretty awesome. And it's a remarkable world we live in for all those things. Let's make sure we talk a little bit more about, did you want to finish telling us about BOP Studios and what made it, so it had some pretty remarkable features in there. For example, in the video they talk about how it's flat down to 9 hertz.
Yes, yeah.
So maybe you should explain to the rock stars what the importance is from 9 hertz to 20 hertz, for example.
Okay.
What's down there?
So there's a lot of air down there, I can tell you that.
Do I need to be, boosting more 9 hertz in my mixes?
Not below that. If you can get down there, you need a pretty big room. The rooms that we done there, they were the first infrasonic rooms. That somebody with good ears, the threshold of audibility is 20 hertz, which is got a 32-foot half wavelength. So that's kind of the depth of a room that you need, even to get into any type of reproduction down to those frequencies. So 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Okay, so they're the rooms, very large mixed rooms. We'll get into Blackbird and all that, but a lot of those rooms are based around that.
How long is the waveform for 20 kilohertz?
Oh God, off the top of my head, it's tiny. Yes, like 7 feet, I think 6, 7 feet.
Oh, it's even that long?
I think so. Oh. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I really concentrate on the lower frequencies, mid, down, low,
Yeah, the highs are just bouncing around.
They're everywhere. It doesn't matter. That's not the
You're just
issue.
lucky. If you can hear 20 hertz, it doesn't matter how long
You're
it
fine.
is. You should just smile.
So, so down there, you're in BOP. So when you get down to those infrasonic frequencies and subsonic frequencies, it goes from, audible noise and pressure to just air pressure. What you're trying to really produce is the environment,
Right,
the natural physical space around you. And it's pretty amazing, although it's just like standing outside somewhere, you know what I mean? It's very three-dimensional and very physical. So most of those rooms, like in BOP, I believe the rooms are around 54 feet deep to get that kind of to reproduce those wavelengths. And then the configuration is very different because you have your stereo system or whatever 5.1 system back in those days, and then you have your fill-in infrasonic monitors. The other part of that is, most of this is also
infrasonic is the same thing as infrared.
No, very different. Infrasonic is infrared.
But doesn't it mean outside of the visible spectrum?
Yes,
or outside
exactly.
of the spectrum?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, see, I'm a little smart.
There you go.
You're making me feel smarter by the moment here.
But so they were the first room. So you everything has a resonant frequency. So your resonant frequency, you don't want to go any lower than 9 because at 7, that's the resonant frequency of your brain. So that's the end of that.
Really?
Yeah, that's true.
Wow.
So there. We went out there. That was an interesting project. That was, I want to say that was in 91, 92.
Yeah, I think it was 90s, or maybe the video said 96. But it was 90s, I think. And then you guys, the video was talking about bringing it back again in 2006 or something like that.
Yeah. I went from, I'll tell you when it was, because I was working, we can get into that, but a lot of projects, government projects. So I went to Russia, which was Soviet Union at the time, working with Gorbachev during Perestroika. And from there, that was in 91, 92. So 93, we went down there. What it was, basically Mandela was either had just come out of prison or was getting out of prison. Mm-hmm. And so a couple of years before he actually got released, they set up these homelands. And in South Africa, there's 57 tribes. It's one country that has, it's very tribal. It's like literally, if you look at the states, and every single state speaks a different language.
Wow.
Which is somewhat arguable still from between the, north, east, south, and west. But so everyone has a different culture. Everyone has their different, language. And a big part of their culture is music. And because they had been suppressed for so long, as the political climate was changing, it was like, okay, the international community, people from, countries all over the world, just to kickstart the infrastructure for the Black community, they built roads, schools, hospitals, universities. And one of the things that they wanted was a way to catalog their music and their culture because they had never, ever had that opportunity. So everything was really just handed down generation by generation. And
I've recorded a djembe before in a big church, and it's got a lot of lows.
Yeah.
A lot of deep frequencies going on there, too.
Yeah, so we ended up building 3 big studios. It was actually the largest music facility on the planet when we finished that. And some of the outside artists that came in at the beginning, like the Lion King, a lot of that was done there.
Wow.
Paul Simon done a lot of the Graceland down there.
Wow, cool.
But mostly a lot of African, arts, and that's the way it was primarily used for. And so, it's great. It's like one of those things that, you really feel like you contributed, and really were able to help the people there because
real positive
it was very, very different. I mean, I grew up in Tottenham, which is, 70% black growing up in the neighborhood where I grew up. So I was used to that. But, when you go somewhere and you really are on the other end of the spectrum, and the people were just amazing. I mean, it really was. That's probably one of the best experiences I've had,
Well, so one of the things they described in the Sound on Sound video is they talked about it being concrete shells that were floated on springs, so that it was so isolated from the outside world that if there was an earthquake going on, you could continue on recording.
Yeah, you wouldn't know. We use a German system. So there was 3 shells inside the construction of that. There was a exterior concrete shell, or a concrete shell that was 14 inches thick, and there was a monolithic core. Now, some of these rooms were 30 feet high, 90-something feet deep, 45 feet wide. Not exactly those numbers because they're multiples of each other, and they wouldn't have been. But I'm just giving you an idea of how big they are. And then on the interior of that, there was we used a company called GERB, which is GEERB, I believe, and they developed these springs, and they're mostly for seismic construction, bridge construction. So you go in and you work out, okay, these are the load points, and we send that to an engineering company in Germany, and they work out how many newtons of pressure there is everywhere. And you go in and you set the piers, put the springs in, set your forms, pour in these huge slabs. Some of these things are 16 to 20 inches thick.
Wow.
And then you're building another structure on top of that. And literally, when you finish everything, you go underneath and you can just undo the bolts. It's incredible to see that, because they're under so many newtons of pressure, positive pressure. Then when you load them, they're on negative pressure. And that thing will just drop down, and you can go in and just undo it by hand.
You can just loosen the bolt.
Just loosen the bolts by hand, yeah.
Wow.
Meanwhile, you've got, a massive structure just floating away on top.
Wow, that's pretty wild. And so what popped into my head was thinking about, ironically, you guys built a place where you could have a herd of elephants storming outside the studio, and you wouldn't hear them inside. But inside the studio, you built a sound system that could reproduce a recording of a herd of elephants, so that it felt like you were right outside with them.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I've been very blessed that way. I touched earlier on, in MOSFILM. I went out when Gorbachev came into power during Perestroika, which I think actually in Russian means to rebuild. We went out there in 1990, spent about 14 months there. Pretty rough spot, to be honest. Back in those days, it was pretty tough.
Yeah.
But it was, as well, same thing. People are, beautiful people are all over the world, man. So it's really, when you're going out and you get to do something that's extremely challenging, and it really benefits the community, that's the beautiful side of the work that I do.
That's pretty wild. Well, let's keep jumping around because there's so much we could talk about. I want to make sure you have a chance to tell us about some of the people you're working with recently that you're really thrilled about. You mentioned Dave Cobb. You had also mentioned some other artists before we started the interview. But do you have any particular artists or stories you want to share around some of the studio designs you're doing?
Yeah. So, I'll get into the studio stuff, but also, we do so many different aspects of acoustic design because, like a big business for us now is restaurants, for example, nightclubs, live sound. So some really cool projects I've been working on recently. Chris Stapleton and Morgan, are very good friends of mine for many years, and I've done, the last 8 years, done a lot of work with Chris, not all in the studio business, but in construction for him. And, when he, about 3 years ago, obviously, he's hit it big, man. He's played to 52,000 people on Saturday night in Dallas, so things are working out.
Yeah.
But when he went from playing at the basement on 8th Avenue and literally from there to 20,000 people, and, Chris is an old school artist, man. He's, he really is. When he writes, he uses a pencil and a legal pad. That's it.
Nice.
That's what he does. And when he performs, he just wants, he's a guitar player. He gets out, rocks out, no earpieces, nothing like that. And what he was finding is that, he's going to these venues and every place was different. It was indoor, outdoor, and trying to get some stability, for himself on stage from a sonic perspective.
I can see that. I'm just drawing an analogy to myself. I know what it's like to have an amp and a guitar and get a sound and be singing and playing in one environment, like at your home or your rehearsal space or studio, and you're feeling it and you can deliver. And then you could take the exact same thing and you go put it on another stage in a room that's shaped a little differently, or it's, the first time you play on a slightly bigger stage and you realize your amp is way too small for that stage. I imagine it's a similar analogy to that.
Yeah. And so it was very similar to that because, like he went from the basement down there at the stage, on 8th Avenue is about 10 foot wide. And now he's on a stage that's 65 feet wide and they want you to run up and down and do do the thing. But so he came to me and he said, look, I've got this new world tour coming up. Would I help him with this issue? He wanted to be able to, basically go from left to right across the room, hear the rest of the band and have equal sound pressure and translation.
But not necessarily use in-ear monitors.
No, he doesn't use in-ear monitors.
Yeah, right.
So this is just like natural acoustics. So what we done, I thought about it and I got to work with a company, who done the stage, who gave me the information that is based upon saying, okay, this is the width of the stage, this is the height. We're playing in these different venues, so you have to design something that can be modular and perform, have the same characteristics depending on the size of the venue. So I came up with a friend of mine. Came up with an algorithm to do a quadratic diffuser, and so
I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm gonna totally make you explain quadratic diffusion to us. But continue your story, and I'll ask you.
So I came up with this algorithm, and we made some samples to test them first of all, and to be honest, straight off the bat, it worked. And so we went into full production, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? This thing's taking, I think it's 3 tractor trailers it takes to ship this thing around."
Wow.
Each of the pods, I believe there's 18 pods. Each pod weighs 800 pounds each, so it's not easy. Believe me, Shoko Clear.
A gorilla, right? Technically, 800 pounds is a gorilla.
That's right. Yeah, I tell you, the roadies like from Shoko Clear, who I love those guys. They were like, they said, look, we only have typically 2 hours to set up, 2 hours to break down after a show, before and after. The first time they set this thing up, it took 11 hours. So,
good Lord.
So, but anyway, they got it down. I'll give it to them. And we ended up building it. And a lot of great things came from it. One is, Dave Cobb plays, he produces Chris Stapleton. And I love Dave, and I love I really listen to him. He's a very bright guy, and his opinion means a lot to me. And he said, like, when we're up there, he goes, you can hear a pin drop. It's amazing. But what none of us even realized or thought about was how it translated to the audience. Because these guys are like, it sounds like they're in the studio.
So it's great to be on the stage playing with this.
Yeah, and then when they're being mic'd, when it's out in a live venue, Chris ended up getting Vance Powell, who was the engineer on his records, to come out and start doing a lot of recording most of the shows live because he was so happy with the performance.
That's great.
I mean, so much so at the end of the day, he said, Chris came to me and said, look, I want to get a patent on this. So he's called the Great Big Sonic Thing is what it is on the patent. And, he was very generous. He gave me half of the patent. So me and him, we owned the rights there. So it was nice.
That's cool,
you know what I mean?
man. That's cool.
So now I'm an inventor.
How many sort of patented systems exist that are sort of that go out and tour shows and do big events and stuff?
We don't. It took like about a year to do all the research. The law firms that done all this stuff, and apparently we're number one in this part of it. I know that.
That's cool.
So it was great, and
that's so cool.
We've got a lot of really good interest. So I've got a feeling every time you see Chris Stapleton play, he's going to see the same set.
The patented sound. Yeah, that's very cool.
It's like, man, it just, that works. They're the things, they're the beautiful part of what I do, so.
Well, so now I know you've also gone down to Muscle Shoals and done stuff down there. Can you share any stories about that?
Yeah, that was a really interesting project. I got contacted out of the blue. I just watched the documentary called Muscle Shoals, and if you haven't seen it, I really recommend it to everybody because it's all about the music, and the musicians, and it's very well done. It was made by a guy called Stephen Badger, and I'll get back to him. Very interesting guy. But anyway, what happened was Dre and Iovine had seen that documentary and had their people at Beats and Interscope Records research the studio. The project that I worked on was a 3614 Jackson Highway project, the Swampers place. And, I'd just seen the movie, and 2 weeks later I get a call from a lawyer from Interscope asking me, would I be interested? They didn't say too much about what the project was, but, anytime they call you, I'm going to answer the phone. So, yeah, I went down to Muscle Shoals, went through some due diligence with them before, got down there, and they, hired my company, which was great. And basically, it was to go in and take, Jimmy Iovine's idea was, he's made some of the biggest records of all time, and obviously Dre. And they really thought that they could help the community because all these guys they're sound engineers.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're musicians and sound engineers, first of all. It's very different than any other side, than the science side of it. I mean, they go from the heart and the feel, it's very spontaneous and, so you can't really translate that into science.
That's one of the things that I know about, watching the documentary from Muscle Shoals and just hearing stories around that is, people talk about it's that this idea that people suggest it's these other elements that made the records great down there because it's a good story to talk about. It's the water and stuff.
Yeah.
But they talk about how it's the people,
it's the people, yeah. Believe me, you go in them studios, it's definitely all about the people. It ain't about the place. But the places are, to Jimmy Iovine was very significant because he had an idea, he felt with the way technology was going and being an engineer and producer himself, that the youth were really losing out on being able to go in and work in these classic great studios that are getting torn down because now as cities grow, they're in metropolitan areas,
right.
Not unlike RCA Studio A here where, lucky Preston Ingram came in and stroked the check and saved that place.
A is where Ben Folds is, right?
That's where Ben was, and that's where Dave Cobb is now. That's one of his
and that
places.
Used to be Javelina at one point.
That's right, yeah, Big Pig. That's right.
And that's I've been in there a few times and I've seen it, and it's a really remarkable place because there's this huge sound stage with the clouds up high, and everything's very diffuse, right?
Yeah, and it has an amazing history. Some of the biggest records ever were recorded there, and especially in the country genre. So anyway,
Sorry, you can hear the coffee maker closing down in the background there.
Smells pretty good too.
It's very authentic. Yeah.
So Jimmy's idea was to go around and buy up these studios and restore them to where the youth can, instead of learning everything on a computer, actually go in and here's a microphone, here's a drum kit, this is how it's done. And that was really the premise of the restoration down there.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like in Nashville, a version of that is the way Belmont University has acquired some of the classic studios.
Yeah,
in
like
Nashville,
Ocean Way.
right?
I built Ocean Way too.
Oh, nice, nice. What haven't you built, Michael?
I built a lot of them, man. I built a lot of them, and I've enjoyed it. But down there, it's funny because I did have some history with one of the Swampers. He was a very dear friend of mine. His name is Barry Beckett, and Barry, was the piano player and keyboardist for them, and he really the key, the nucleus of the four guys. I'd built 2 studios for Barry while he was here, and got to know him really well and his family, and sadly he's passed away. But he used to tell me about, all these people who's recording. You're like Aretha Franklin, Wilson Pickett, going on and on and on.
Yeah, I think in the movie, isn't he the one who talks about trying to figure out how to approach one of those songs with I don't remember if it was Aretha or Wilson, but he finally comes up with the one.
Him. I think it was Spooner Oldham. That was Spooner.
Oh, okay,
that's
Spooner.
Right.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, I know all these guys.
Story.
These guys are super cool guys, and they're all simple country folk. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah,
and they just know how to make music. They go down, they jam. It's very different. But so we went down there, and I got to work with a foundation. I got to work with Beats, and then I got introduced to Apple, who acquired Beats, and to Stephen Badger, who he really is a super cool guy. I knew most probably 20 minutes after speaking to him that he had a story to tell himself, and it turns out that was the very first documentary or any type of film he had ever made. And I said, well, you made one hell of a job of it.
Right.
And, he actually he's a CEO of Mars Confectionaries. He comes from, pretty big family. And
Mars, the candy bars?
Yeah, Mars and
no way.
pedigree, dog food and all that. But, he's just a love for music and pursued an interest that he had, and, very generous guy.
So what was some of the stuff? Have you already done the design work down there? Or
we went in, there was a whole group, team that Beats put together. And basically we went in, we cataloged everything inside the building. Because since, I think since the early 80s, they shut down the studio. I can't remember the company that bought all the publishing and everything from the Swampers, and really the studio was shut down, and it became like a used appliance store. Had several other lives, but I mean, just by the grace of God, no one tore out the studio. So when we went in there, now the roof was leaking and all this lot, general stuff. So we went in, cataloged everything, and took it completely apart and put it back together again. I mean, like Humpty Dumpty. And honestly, it's impossible to tell. I mean, it really came out great.
So it was kind of the idea of rebuilding an engine or something.
Just restoration,
let's take it apart,
complete,
restore every bit, put it back together so that it's really in great shape.
And, for a building that really nobody knew about or had anything going on, they get, I think, like 1,500, 1,000, 1,500 people a week go through there now. And so it's really revitalized a lot of the interest in the music scene down there, and it's been great for everybody.
Remind us again, because there are 2 studios down there.
Fame,
right?
yes, Fame.
and
3614 Jackson Highway.
614 Jackson Highway.
3614.
And that originally came from a split between Rick and the Swampers or something like that? Okay.
Yep, they went off their own, and, everybody made up in the end. But, yeah, they kind of ended up going in different directions. With Jerry Wexford, the Swampers went with him and, done their own thing. I mean, that's just life, isn't it, man? Everybody moves on.
Sure. And then sometimes bands get back together again later on,
That's right. That's right. So, yes.
So this is all super cool. We're going to take a break and come back in for the second half of the show here. Before we do, I do want to ask you this question. Tell us, Michael, for those of us who aren't getting A+ in our calculus classes, how do you explain a quadratic diffuser? Why are they so
quadratic
important?
diffuser, what we do, and we like, say, for example, quadratic diffuser basically based upon prime numbers, and the theory behind them is
what is a quadratic diffuser? A microphone?
No, it's there are panels, acoustic panels, and so what we do, you really have different elements that are different lengths, like I said, that are based upon a prime number. Because in theory, if there's no division of anything, then it's infinity, and then if it's infinity, then there's no cancellation because there's nothing the same.
Right.
So that's really the theory that you start from now. When we building like the one I done for Chris, it's, very dense and very big. And, we looked at, different lows and mid frequencies, attenuation, and then dispersion of high frequency.
Right. So Rockstars, let's try and help some of this too. So for example, a quadratic diffuser is not something you're going to use to soundproof your studio. It's something you're going to use to control the way the sound is bouncing around inside the room.
Again, in theory, it's like building a sonic wall, which has a huge amount of mass and density and diffusion. And when you energize it with monitoring, you don't even know it's there. That's the best way to...
And the opposite of is this flat wall that's on the side of my studio right next to your head where the sound just bounces right off and slaps
bounces,
right back into
hits
your
that
ear.
wall, half wavelength, cancels. So the idea of pure diffusion, I mean, it works really well in certain aspects. Mm-hmm. Now, in like a listening environment, like a control room, people, everybody has their own opinions, and I mean, this is my opinion, but to me, I look for sonically neutral environments. Well, I always relate to being out in a field somewhere and listening to something, where, no reflections.
Right.
So the same thing as in diffusion.
Right, kind of like Studio A.
Yep.
In fact, it's funny because I've thought about that. I do the Hay Bale studio down at Bonnaroo, and we're in a tiny studio, and we deaden it down a little bit. So it's, but it's still, everything's all on top of each other. And I haven't done this yet, but I thought, man, I bet, if we were just recording outside, assuming there wasn't too much, ambient noise too close, we'd probably get a whole lot less bleed on the microphones because there's no wall for the sound to bounce off to get in the mic.
Yeah, that's what you want to strive for.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So, when you look around, so two things. One is I remember when I went to Middle Tennessee State University and started school there, we had this control room, and I remember them describing it as a live end, dead end. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it was all dead stuff around the speaker side, and the back of the room had you typically on the back wall, you'd see these things that were quadratic diffusers or, some version of that. Mm-hmm. So the idea is, what's the idea with something like that? Is that a good design idea?
Well, it's like I said, it's horses for courses. A lot of that stuff came from the 70s and 80s. Compression ceilings. The thing is, really now we know so much more, and also the equipment that we're using, like the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. I mean, you're listening on monitors that maybe went down to 40 hertz.
Right.
So it's a completely different deal. I mean, we're dealing with something that goes way lower. Then those can cause more issues. That can hinder them more than what they can help.
Right. Plus your design had to consider things like, how are we going to ventilate the smoke out of the control room?
Yeah. And then like people think of compression ceiling. Okay, a solid compression ceiling. That was a big thing actually. Tom Hidley done that. Really did come from Westlake originally. That was one of his first things.
It's kind of like having the ceiling angled down above your head, right where you're sitting to listen.
And so what Tom realized eventually is when you got into the time alignment and phasing is also back then most of the system were horn loaded systems with a pretty wide diffusion. So what they were seeing or what they were seeing on a graph and hearing is you've got the diaphragm and you've got the engineer. That's the signal path, really, audible signal, airborne signal path. But when you have a compression ceiling and you have dispersion on a horn, that goes up in the air, it hits the ceiling, it comes back down to the engineer. Well, that's twice the distance as the first signal that came in, that the engineer's hearing this, and then so many milliseconds later, he's hearing the reflection coming down and creating a lot of phasing issues.
Yeah.
So, Tom got into the design philosophy of sonically neutral rooms. And that's really what I've also focused on. So, to me, a mix room, so mastering mix room, or, to me, you don't want the room to have any real characteristic. You want it pretty flat, and very similar. Like, again, I keep going to the exterior environment. That's what you strive for. It's not an effects room.
Exactly.
A recording space, a live room, ISO booths are more geared towards effects and manipulation of reverberation time inside rooms.
So I think that's a great concept, and we can get into this more after the break, but I like to think of what I first learned about a speaker, the cabinet. When you're seeing a speaker, like, oh, wouldn't it be so great to have a beautiful mahogany wood and all this stuff like that, and then those things might be totally legitimate, but the speaker is meant to play the sound from the speaker, and you're meant to not hear the cabinet of it so much, right?
Correct.
As opposed to thinking about it like a guitar, where you're like, you definitely want to hear the wood of that guitar. You want to hear that guitar
resonance.
resonating.
You want to hear.
I kind of understood that analogy before, but you just introduced a new one, which is thinking about the rooms and the spaces in your studio, where all the rooms out there that you put microphones in, those are instruments.
Yes.
That are meant to help create a cool sound that gets captured on the mic. But the room you play it back in, the control room, is meant to be a neutral one that, like,
so to
we're
me,
not trying to add anything more here.
The speakers, the room are one piece. They're not two separate entities. You design the room and the speakers as one entity.
So cool. Well, Rockstars, we're going to take a break for a minute, and we'll be right back for the jam session. And I got lots of great questions for Michael just to really dig into studio design. And I'm going to ask you all the dumb questions that we just want to know about this stuff, because we got an expert in the room with us. So thanks so much for being here. Rockstars, a reminder to you that if you are actually digging into mixing more yourselves, go check out my free mix class, mixmasterbundle.com, where I teach you how to mix in any DAW using just free plugins. If you're getting started, that's some cool stuff and could help you out. We'll see you in just a minute for the jam session. Cheers.
Roswell Pro Audio brings you microphone design that is out of this world. Endorsed by a growing list of artists and producers like Phil Collen of Def Leppard, Ross Hogarth, who's recorded Van Halen, Ziggy Marley, and the Doobie Brothers, and Supa Dupes, working with Drake, Mary J. Blige, and Eminem. These are all rock stars that have discovered just how great Roswell microphones sound. Check out the Mini K47, which uses a capsule modeled on the one in the vintage U47 at a street price of only $299. Or the beautiful Delphos condenser microphone with a capsule tuned like the vintage U67 with great clarity and far lower noise at a street price of only $899. In fact, you are hearing my voice right now on the beautiful Delphos microphone. These mics are carefully crafted by hand and immediately feel good even before you plug them in and hear how great they sound. These are well-built microphones that will last you and your studio a lifetime of great recording. Check out more audio examples of these awesome mics at roswellproaudio.com.
Hey, rock stars, we're back now. We're going to jump into the jam session. My guest today is Michael Cronin, world-class studio designer. And we've been talking about Michael's wonderful history of designing studios all over the world. And now we're going to really dig into some down and dirty questions about what it means to do some of that stuff. Michael, welcome back. You ready to jam?
Thank you. Yep, let's go.
All right, dude. So one of the things I wanted to ask you right away, actually, it was a continuation of a question from earlier where you were talking about the importance of building trust. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about all the examples of that for myself, even on this podcast. I realized that every time I say I'm going to do something or want to, share something with the rock stars, it's an opportunity to either build trust or hopefully not destroy it, But I do feel it many times. I feel like I'm faced with, the fear of making a mistake or just trying something and making a mistake. What does trust building mean to you to do it the way you've done it successfully? Does it mean you never get to make mistakes?
Well, I'll answer the second part first. Well, everybody makes mistakes. That's part of growing. That's life. And you just don't, like any part of life, not just in design work, but, you just learn from your mistakes and move on. As long as you catalog stuff and you know where you came from, then you know where to go to, And like I said, for me, I had a pretty unique experience because although I didn't go to school to study, acoustic design, I met somebody at, a really prominent time in my life where, and I found out a natural ability for it, that this person, his life was just about archiving, collecting information, and learning from that and moving forward. So I've always been very skeptical and cagey and very inquisitive throughout my apprenticeship with Tom, and he was always very willing to share that with me. And that again goes into the trust factor. When you work closely with people, you have to trust them. You have to you have to delegate. You can't do everything yourself, because you don't get anywhere. You're just going to be on your own at the end of the day, because no one will put up with you.
That's a tough one sometimes. I mean, I think that a lot of us get caught up thinking that we need to do everything ourselves, or we get worried about like, well, we can't really afford to, pay somebody to do something else. We better just do it ourselves. And then we can dig a hole for ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, and that's all driven by scale. So when you work with people, if I'm working, with some young kid who's just come out of school and they want some help, I really give them as much attention as I'm working for Kendrick Lamar right now. It really doesn't. You could be Elvis Presley for all I care. I mean, I want to give the best information and the best product for everybody. There's still, like I said, it's all the same to me. And, to be successful, you have to trust people. You have to be able to step back and let them learn and make mistakes and go back. And there's no better way to learn, really, to be honest with you.
But you're suggesting also that it's a matter of scale. So that was one of my questions was, what are the challenges of going from being responsible for a small budget studio to being responsible for a much larger budget studio? And it sounds like you're talking about that. It's like, it's almost like you still only got the same amount of bandwidth of Michael Cronin to share with your client in a 24-hour day.
Yep.
But if you need to deliver more, you extend yourself through the people that you
time
work
and allocation of how that, how you best service, your time. And you've got to do it evenly and fairly. Like, I mean, as I sit here, we have restoration work that we're doing for RCA Studio B, where we've been working on this project for the planning of it a year and a half. And it's not a very big project, but it's obviously a very prestigious, very nice project and a very important project to me.
Yeah.
And then I'm out in Los Angeles building, 17 studios for Interscope and studios for Apple. It makes, it's all the same, really.
I picture it's just you with a hammer and like an apron full of nails.
I gave up wearing those
at supersonic speed, right?
I gave up. Although that's another reason I think for my success has been so important is that I came from really a completely different approach, because I look at things, in 2 ways. Or 3 ways, really, because with dyslexia is, the design and then the actual construction side of it. And when you really understand that, I've been a general contractor here for 25 years, so I really understand the principles, and then the correct execution that is related to the budget, because, you want to give everybody, you want to get as much as you can out of it for everybody, and that's the way that goes. I mean, from a design perspective, the sad thing is for people starting off, you're going to start in a smaller environment, smaller space, And they are by far the most difficult to do. You know, it's different when you really can translate into wavelengths and really calculate, you can calculate the room nodes anyway. But, you know, the bigger the space, you know, you're going from reproduction of frequencies to getting into control of reverberation times inside a place. So, I mean, starting up in a small room, it really is bring that reverberation down. That's through the internal treatments. But you start off with your isolation shell. You always want to orientate the room so you're set up in the long dimension, and very simple guidelines and I live by these. It doesn't matter if the room is 20 feet or 60 feet long. Is you always go on the principle of where the listening position is. So front to back, where do you want to be? The last place you want to be is in the center of the room. That's where the biggest null in the room. You know,
I think about that as I find myself standing nearly in the center of my room when I'm mixing.
Yeah. So, you know, the rule, what you want to go by is look at thirds. Okay. So you always want to be, the engineer wants to be the listening position in the front third of the room from the acoustic boundary. And the acoustic boundary not being the monitor you're listening to, but the physical shell, the wall, the construction of it. So
if you were going to break down an empty room, the first mark you would make on the floor
would be
find 1/3.
That's right.
Mark the center of that. You do want to be on the center from the left and right walls.
Yes, that's right. You always want to be in the center. And so, you know, so if you've got a room that's, say, 30, we're just going to round these numbers off. Okay?
Can we use these dimensions?
Well, I don't know these things, but I'll give you, like, say, for example, if you had a room that's 30 feet deep, right? So 30 feet deep, the listening position is at 10 feet.
That's right. First rule of teaching math classes, pick easy numbers.
That's right. That's right. So, and the width typically would be, you know, the second dimension, which is going to be, you know, a good ratio would be actually 19 by 30, for example, 21 by 30. So kind of a 2/3 of the full number. So if you're 10 foot back, that listening position, then that would be, you put the apex about 18 inches behind your head. So your actual speakers are set up on a 10-foot equilateral triangle, but you are still 1/5 of the way inside from the rear of the apex. That's going to give you the best low frequency response. Now, if you were working in a film production, it's the other way. You're flipping it the other way. So you're listening at 2/3. And then the monitors are set up at 45 degrees, like for THX and stuff like that. So that's again, so as the low frequency rises in the front third, lowers in the center of the big null, picks back up again in the rear of the second third. So they're the principles there. And it doesn't matter what room you're in, if it's big or small. Obviously, stay away your basic stuff. Stay away from anything that's square or repeating the same or doubling of distances.
Let's dig into that stuff a little bit more, and maybe for this sake, maybe we'll just stick to the home studio dimension. People mixing records, because that's going to be most of our audience. And send me an email if you're making movies and you wish we had talked more about that. But for me to repeat back what you said, just for clarity. If I've got a control room that's, you know, long, wide, and tall to the ceiling, then I'm going to pick 1/3 out from the wall that I'm facing to mix. I'm going to come 1/3 of the length of the room, and then find the middle spot there. And then I guess I assume I'm sitting in a chair to mix too, and I'm not necessarily standing where my head's halfway between the ceiling and the floor. Maybe that's not such a great spot either. But so 1/3 out, and then I bring the speakers out from the wall, and you said it was about a 10 foot. Well, no, I'm sorry. What you said?
Well,
you said
it depends on the depth of the room.
Triangle.
That relationship and the setup of the actual monitoring is going to be determined where your 1/3 distance is inside that room. So if it's 20 feet or 21 feet, it's going to be 7 feet. You know, so that's what I'm getting at there.
So if it was 21 So let's go back to the 30 room. So I'm 10 feet out from the wall. And then does that determine the next number as far as this equilateral triangle?
Well,
Or 21 feet wide on the room,
Yes.
that determines it, right? Okay.
Yeah. So then treatment wise, depending on your budget, it's very easy to just go and make some panels. Go to, if you're here in Nashville, Owens Corning,
Right.
for example. People use a lot of 703. You really want to use a mixture of densities. So 703 stands for, it's a 7.0 product that has a 3-pound density per cubic foot.
Oh, okay.
705 is 5-pound density. So the attenuation of different frequencies. Don't direct apply them to the walls like this. You want an airspace. You want to be able to create a resonant cavity. So
the sound gets behind the 703, bounces off the wall, and then sort of traps itself
exactly,
against the 703.
Exactly. That's what you want to do. And the same, that symmetry is key with that, especially in the front third, the first reflections for the engineer, and then the rear of the room and on the ceiling. The ceiling can be taken care of. Like here, you've got a good example of your ceiling clouds right above your listening position, taking the first reflection up to speakers, coming back here.
She's putting a smile on my face. You
you're
said
doing all right,
the word
you're doing
good
all right.
related to my studio. Thank you, Michael.
There you go. And then again, the rear of the room is the same principle, absorption before you'll get into diffusion in a small room. You want diffusion in a large space.
Yeah.
So
I don't really have any real bass trapping going on in here.
But, the same thing. Just make some panels and then offset them. So let me think how I can explain this. So if you look down the center of a room and you had a flat panel on the back of the wall, and so if you're looking at the rear of the wall on the left side, you want to tilt the left side towards you, keeping the back side nearest to the rear wall. So it's maybe at a 10 or 15 degree angle. So as the energy hits it, it's not coming straight back to you. Again, it's diffused back into the side
and that's
wall
for a
environment.
hard surface, or that's for even a soft absorbent panel?
Soft surface. So, in the perfect world, you want that signal going past you one time.
Right.
That's
exactly.
it. That's what you want.
Yeah. Let me help clarify that too. So Rockstars, Michael talked about the first reflection. So what that means is you're sitting at the speakers play some sound, and the sound comes from the speakers directly in a straight path to your ears and hits your left and right ears. But it's also radiating in all directions, and it's going off to the wall and then bouncing off the wall and coming to your ear a little later. It's going to the ceiling and bouncing off that. It's coming down and hitting the console or the table right in front of you with your keyboard on it and bouncing and hitting your ear at a different time. In fact, that reflection off the console, I remember learning this years ago, and then I tested the theory here when I was playing some tones out of my speakers. And I put a Earthworks mic where I would sit and listen, and I could measure the frequency response. I had learned that the console can create a dip because of the typical length down to the console reflecting up somewhere in the 200 to 250 range, like sort of what we often call the muddy range of our mixes. And I put up a soft panel instead of the console. I just put a soft panel between the speaker and me. And I watched that dip just straighten out on the response. Right. It was really amazing. And I guess the result of having those kind of reflections that cause frequency dips is I might be mixing and I might think, I can either boost some low mids in the acoustic guitar, or I'm not hearing a problem because the reflection is causing it to sound like it's already been scooped out by an EQ, but it hasn't really been scooped out.
That's right. And also another issue that comes is phase cancellation, as that signal goes to the back of the room, comes back at you, and it, when you have the same energy going forward, you're inverting the phase and canceling, creating a null inside the room. So
and the center of the room, literally, if you stand in the middle, the center of the whole room, you're getting like the worst place you can anything anywhere.
You can be anything that's square and in the middle of it. That's it. You're done.
I don't even think it's feng shui to be in the center of the room.
Nah, so they're the little things, diffusion, then bioabsorption, is like what I'm getting at, and creating panels that have mass, different densities. They'll attenuate at different frequencies, and a big, problem, but people come up against that they don't understand is if you do use the same material, or like I said, I'm going to go back to 703 or 705 or people using R19, R13, is if you utilize so much of the same material, when you're listening, people say, well, I don't have any mid-range, turn up this or turn up that or turn down this. But in reality, or they'll say it's too boomy. Well, it's not too, it actually isn't. The low end isn't muddy. What it is, you've just annihilated the mid-range.
Right.
So that way, you've really worked against yourself. So it's getting that balance. And also setting up your monitors are really, so if you've got a 2.1 system or whatever type of system you're using, you want to add
2.1, so Rockstars, that would just be stereo, left and right speaker and a sub, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Let's just say everybody's got that.
Everybody's got that, right? So a company we were setting up for a surround sound mix, and this is like back in the late 80s, early 90s, and if you're in the room and your console, you're in a sonically a well-treated room, but you're getting into adding in a surround system, back then it was a 5.1 system. You go out and you lay out your monitors, freestanding monitors around the console, the correct distances. And then it's like the hardest part is where do you put that subwoofer or subwoofers?
Right.
And the key, I'm telling you, is people would go in and listen and say, okay, move it here, move it there. It's the best thing is set up your microphone in the engineer's position at the right height, and then go back to the subwoofers, which typically you want to face into the side walls where they connect to the wall, energize the wall, and then your low frequency goes way down. But if you go in and you're using an analyzer, you can moving that speaker slightly and watching that, because your microphone is at the listening position, and just tilting it, sliding it, and suddenly you'll see that curve smooth right out again.
Really, really. So, for example,
it's the opposite of what you'd really think.
Yeah, my sub is positioned like right in the center between the two speakers, and it's out a little ways from the wall, and it's the speaker's facing me.
Yeah, typically you want it over to one side if you've got one sub.
Really fascinating.
So it attaches to the wall and then gets the full length.
Right,
that's what it does. It holds on and goes around.
Like it's almost like I'm trying to energize a spot that's kind of missing the
it's
like trying to play the trumpet and you're not really resonating it in the right part or something
that's right.
like that.
Yeah.
So or flute's probably better.
Yeah, you want it to couple to the structure, and then you're going to get that build up.
Fascinating. Wow. All right, I got to move my stuff around, Rockstars.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Set up your microphone right here, I'm telling you.
We're getting there. I also have a big, fat, giant, super cool console, but boy, is that thing a monster. And I recently got this standing desk, which I'm standing in front of right here, and I wheel that up in front of it, which pushes me back even further, and I'm standing and I'm almost mixing in the center of the room. But I will tell you, I'm physically way more comfortable than ever. So always looking for a balance of that.
It's all the little things that make the big differences.
Yeah.
You go in and you just start tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, starting, like I said, at the front section, front area of the room, and then the rear area of the room, simple cloud systems. And, you're in business, really, to be honest. You can do so much.
Well, so for the DIY home studio owner who is listening right now, and who is thinking about like, well, I've got this space, I've got this room I want to use for my studio. What's if you're gonna let's say you can't really plan it all out perfectly in one move. You probably can, but for those of us, we may need to just experiment our way towards the right solution. What's some of the first moves? I'm guessing, I'm gonna throw this out there, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong listening to you, but isn't the first move get those speakers on stands, move that subwoofer to a corner, put that mic in the mix position, or maybe even, wouldn't you begin by listening before you even do the microphone, just to sort of get an adjustment?
But your distances from, the 1/3, 2/3, if you're going along there, and you have some treatment on the walls, because otherwise you're not really going to be listening to a bunch of misinformation, because it's going to cancel just, fluttering around the place. But if you come along those principles, 1/3, 2/3, slight treatment on the walls, you do a little bit of research on the width and the depth of your frequency. You can get that online. You know, if the room's this deep and the ceiling's this high, then kind of, you manipulate the width of the room if you can
Get a
do
sense
that.
of where to put the microphone for your mix position.
Yeah, exactly.
And then start moving things around and measure it and make sure that your speaker system is playing and getting the most balanced flat response for that particular room, right?
Yeah, and you want to dial in, like if I'm going in, like for example, Blackbird Studios, so I designed a studio like that where you've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of bands through the years that go in there, and you've got to try and please everybody. So you're going in.
The first thing the engineer does is like scoot the NS10s around and reposition them, right?
That's right. Yeah. So you go in and you want a sonically neutral environment that you have a really a listening environment that's sonically neutral from left to right. You have the same SPL, but in a small room, that's very difficult to do. It's not really possible, to be honest with you, to do it accurately. So it's basically, through trial and error, if you're doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing to start off with is look at, when you choose a space, is the room dimensions. And like I said, you can just get online and pick something up and
there's
go
room
around
dimension calculators online and stuff.
And then
golden ratios.
That's right. And then you turn around and like isolation, a really inexpensive way. If you don't have isolation, you're wasting your time.
Isolation in terms of making sure you're not hearing other things bleed through the walls.
Bleeding through, you're not, the neighbors can't hear you can't hear them,
I wanted to when I built this place and designed it, I had enough of trying to record a band in a basement studio where the drummer, you hear the drums coming through the door of the control room at the same time as you're trying to judge whether or not you're miking them properly. Mm-hmm. So I was like, all right, I want to be able to close the door to my control room, hear the low end of the kick drum, and know that all I'm hearing is what's coming from the speakers so that I could, make an accurate judgment on it.
Yeah. And a very easy trick to do for isolation in a home environment is, so like, for example, you've got this room, you've got sheetrock on the walls, is to staple up carpet underlayment. It's dirt cheap. You just put that up, staple on the walls and the ceilings, then apply 2 layers of 5/8 drywall. What that does, that gives you the dampener, where we use different tech materials for that, which do really well. But believe me, for a few bucks, you could double the STC rating of a wall very easily.
So let me qualify that. So Rockstar's STC stands for Sound Transmission Class. See how smart I am, Michael?
There you go.
And that means that that is the measurement that tells you whether the sound is transmitting through the wall. Mm-hmm. So once again, it's just that difference that gets confused sometimes for people who are new to this. The difference between soundproofing, where you're not transmitting sound through the wall, and sound treatment, where you're not hearing reflections bouncing off the walls, or you're not having room modes. Mm-hmm. Maybe you should explain to us, if you'd like, what a room mode is in a room, or a node.
So a room node,
both actually.
I can show you, but I wish I could show them. But I calculate the room node. So obviously I've known from experience certain key distances, and we will design around those. So we go in and we say, okay, this length for the room is, and I'll use half wavelength of 20 hertz, so it's about 32 feet. And I'll look at the room nodes, and I'll go into the width of the room, which is going to be like 25'2". And then I'll go into the height of the room, and hypothetically it's at 11'6". So I'll have all of these, then the fundamental frequency starting off at 20 hertz all the way down, going through there. And
the fundamental frequency of that room length is the distance from one wall to the other.
That's right. It's always the boundary.
Or that's a half of a waveform,
half wavelength, but it's always boundary to boundary. So it's always the longest dimension. So it's not where the speakers, it's the actual physical dimension of the room.
Right, exactly.
So what we do then, we go in and, we cross-reference all the fundamental frequencies all the way through there. So I'll give you an example.
And while he's doing that, Rockstars, I'm going to say one more time that the room that you're recording the instruments in, that room, it's okay for it to be like a giant pipe organ pipe. But your control room, Michael's going to explain how you start out with a pipe organ pipe, but we're going to do these things to it to stop it from being a pipe organ pipe. because you just want it to be have a flat response. You don't want it to have a resonance and have a sonic signature and character to it.
So, this is a room I'm doing for the artist Kendrick Lamar. So I'll go in. I've got this is in decimal point metric. It's 26.8 feet by 17.3 by 12 feet. So I'm going to go in and look at the frequency. So it's starting off at half wavelength of 26.8 is 21.08 hertz. So that's what we're looking at reproducing in that room. Now we can manipulate that with some of the treatment, but physics is physics. I'll get this down to most probably 18 hertz.
You know what I do at 21 hertz?
What's that?
I put a low-cut filter on my mix. Try and get rid of it.
So then we're going from 21, 0.8 to 42.16, 63.25, 8.4, going all through these frequencies. And then when I'm going back over again and looking at the width of 17.3, I'm cross-referencing to make sure that that we do not repeat the same frequency, and the width, the height, and the depth, because I know that I'm going to get a dip in frequency through cancellation. Same frequencies, are going to cancel out. So they're the simple things to start off with. They're the basics.
Yeah. So I'll try and say that back to you again. Rockstars, the length of the room has a whole bunch of frequencies that room is tuned to. The width also has a whole bunch of frequencies. And you're picking intentionally, Michael, you're picking dimensions so that the length and the width, so that those frequencies don't just happen to line up on the same frequencies at different spots. Yes. And from what I remember about learning about the design for this place is that the golden ratios, if that's a useful description, are ones where the length, width, and height basically just spread those frequencies out enough that when you look at it, it feels a little bit more like a flat average rather than like something with a whole bunch of bumps in it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what you're looking for. So from there, we that's really the first part of the process. And then going in from there is the different types of designs for the different types of rooms. I mean, like I said, reproduction of sound, it doesn't matter if it's hip hop or classical or country or pop. Everybody wants to sit there and listen to what is being reproduced inside the live room or the isolation booths.
Right.
So the only place like where you get into the film industry and you're dealing with much lower frequencies, much larger rooms. So
right, the infrasonic.
That's right.
Infrasonic, right?
That's it.
We're learning so much. So so that's pretty cool. It's a good reminder, too, that it doesn't really matter what the style of music is you're doing. The reproduction is still, it's the basics of
that's
physics
what it is.
and sound.
You want someone to sit there and they want to hear what they're recording. Like I said, a control room really is like, look at symmetry is so important. Balance is so important. When you get into the designing, again, if you're in a smaller space, don't try and make it sound big, because it'll only attenuate its certain frequencies that you end up missing a whole spectrum.
Yeah.
So in a live room experience or an isolation booth, they're really effects rooms. And you kind of I always have designed along the lines of using a lot of natural materials like stone, wood, things that I feel like that are in the environment are really natural sounding to us.
Right.
I've always felt that I've definitely got the best results.
And this is, we're talking about the live rooms out there for recording, or we're talking about also, so that mentality of this natural wood sounds great. You wouldn't necessarily, you might want to apply that for aesthetics in a control room, but you don't necessarily want to apply that for the sonics.
No,
right?
not for the sonics, no.
That's such a fascinating,
and then, you get into, the different type of baffle systems. If I get into the other side of it, I'm trying to give you the down and dirty and basic way to get started somewhere. But when you get into some of the larger facilities that we do, like the Blackbirds and Interscope and Apple, you're getting into resonant frequency of every single panel that you're putting in there. So you're going, all the way across the bandwidth inside each of those rooms.
Do you have a whole team of number crunchers that just like sit
No,
around
that
and
side of it
crunch?
I do myself. I work all that out, and then I have
Do you have to put on Coke bottle glasses just to do the math?
Sometimes it feels like that. Feel like Bubbles in the Trailer Park Boys, But no, I mean, after a while, you build hundreds and hundreds, and you get pretty good at it. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, and I'm sure you begin to recognize this. The brain is great at picking up on patterns. It's what makes the great chess masters. And I'm sure you pick up on all these different patterns of what goes into studio designs and everything like that.
And so, like here, say for example, being in Nashville, we have Nashville's built upon, best songwriters in the world and best musicians in the world. That's why everybody's comes here to, it doesn't matter if you're a rapper or a pop artist, people come here for and have come here historically, for those two things. So, and then the studios here relate to that. There's a lot of large rooms, like you mentioned, the tracking room. There's like Ocean Way, all the studios at Blackbird, Starstruck. I mean, they're all over the place, but they're large tracking spaces built for, from a big rock bands to orchestral work. And we do get a lot of film work here now, which is great. Where when I'm working out west, it's a different deal. The environment for listening is the same. They want a great sounding control room, but most of the work, they record a lot like their vocals and stuff like that. So it's really the studio spaces are so much smaller.
Right.
Down to the style.
The space goes to the control room.
Yes.
And the booth is just enough for a vocalist.
That's what they look for more than anything else. So, like I said,
fascinating.
smaller spaces, don't get yourself into trouble trying to treat something it's never going to be,
Let's talk about that for a sec, because I think the small vocal booth is the closest thing to the size and scope of a space that somebody might be starting with in a home studio environment.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some things that people need to be educated about? What do we need to consider in a vocal booth to really capture great sounding vocals in there?
Well, yeah, build a booth, the old thing, non-parallel walls, use quite a lot of absorption, that's important, because,
but don't make the classic mistake of absorbing all the highs where the
that's
lows
right.
aren't
That's what I'm
treated,
saying.
right?
Don't use the same material for everything, because you're going to wipe that whole.
Now, how would we absorb the low frequencies? So a vocal, we don't need a whole lot below 100, right?
No.
So does that mean we don't need to worry about the treatment below 100, or does that mean we still need to treat it down?
You
to
still
low
would
frequencies?
treat it down below there, because the room's going to be used for more than just vocals. So if you're not going to reproduce it, it's not going to affect it anyway.
Right.
But if you're using it for an amp closet as well, then you need to be able to.
And so this is something I wrote down too, is Superchunk. Is a great band out of North Carolina, but I also learned that it's the name for the absorption that you put in a corner of a studio by stacking these triangular chunks of different absorption materials, I guess. Can you, before I butcher the description of it, can you tell us anything about that? Is that even a term you guys use, Superchunk?
Not really.
absorption?
I don't. What we do is like, not unlike what you have here. You're going to get a build up on the corners. So taking the corners out, a very simple, easy way to do it, if you like a bit of hard work, is we build in I'll go in here and lay out these corners at 60-degree angle. So I create from the center of the panel, if I ran a 90-degree angle, it's going to end up as my equilateral triangle. Because you want to reinforce the corners. One is stop the build out, but also then the energy that's emitted, really, you're just hearing that speaker. The speaker's not.
So the speakers are in the corners.
The speakers are in front of that panel.
In front of that panel.
And that panel, a simple way to do it is, you can do it with multiple layers of drywall. You can do that, but what we do, we build plywood forms. We build a frame on the floor, cover the back in plywood, stand it up, bolt it up, and then put a form on the front. When I say a form, just a plywood facing, and then infill it with concrete. You know, you can do it in the weekend. Pop down to Home Depot.
I love doing things in weekends.
Yeah, and then you get that mass and that energy, and what it basically is doing is changing the dimension. You know, the physical dimension. You've got a new dimension coming in there.
So in my example, these panels that we put in the corners are just a 45-degree angle, shaving off the corners, but they would make I don't even, what's a 45, 90?
Yeah, it's a 90 degree.
Like
but,
degree.
you'd be, what
Which
you want to
wouldn't
be
work, right?
is at a 30-degree angle there, which gives you, if you go from that center point, so if you hit the center of that panel and came off, and you go back and you went straight across, then you have an equilateral triangle.
Right, because you want that equilateral triangle.
Well,
Well,
actually going to show you
stuff.
something.
Maybe we can. Maybe if you've got some images for us, we can just include those in the blog post too. If you got anything you want to share.
Yeah, I can show you some stuff.
Let me see what other questions I got for. Maybe we can talk about designing the space for recording as well, because we talked about, spaces that work. What are some of the, let's just assume for a minute that we can just. It becomes more creative. We can trust our ear. We can go, this sounds kind of cool. So I like this room for doing some stuff. But there must be some stuff that we're still screwing up. Like, is it low frequencies that we tend to forget about in our the rooms where the microphone goes, the recording rooms? And are there any basic tips that you want to share about, things to remember to think about out in those tracking spaces?
Yeah, I mean, you want to, like I said, the old cliche, non-parallel walls. Okay, you're really trying to eliminate any standing waves from hitting the same distance, and then simple things like draperies. Where you're utilizing two materials on the same surface. You're opening and closing a simple drape.
You can change the sound of the room.
Change completely dramatically, and, typically you want 50% fullness, which means if the wall's 20 feet long, you want 30 feet of drapes, which gives you about 3 pleats a foot. So that's important. So it's just not a flat surface, then it really acts like a baffling system.
And the drapes have to be kind of heavy. They just
heavy backing, some theatrical drapes, and you can find that stuff on eBay and Craigslist. It's not hard, because people are touring around, and once they're done.
Fascinating. So, so the drape thing can allow you to treat the room, which is great. What about low frequency buildup in the tracking spaces?
Well, they help that too. The other side of it is the bigger the traps that you use. So if you do, another simple thing is just go and get some 1/2-inch OSB, or it's like a Fantech. You cover both sides, and you wrap with a 1-inch or 2-inch insulation, cover them, and then when you hang that, it attenuates. So the larger the baffle you create, the lower the frequency.
So just the physical size, the width and length of the baffle itself determines the lower reach of that frequency.
Yeah, so when I'll go back to, say, some of the classic rooms here that are designed around, from 20 to 20, is like we're going to have members that are 32 feet long. One attenuating member that is going to be hung independently. And so we know that frequency, once that low end attaches to it, it's going to go down and hit the full half wavelength. So that's when we get into the independent frequencies, and when we're
like
listening.
Each panel is designed to address a certain frequency in that space.
Yes,
wow.
and so just if you take that same principle and put it in a tracking space, again, making multiple size panels with mass is what's going to really clean up the low end inside a room.
Now, do you really have to know ahead of time what frequencies you're trying to attenuate before you start doing these panels?
Think, I mean,
can you kind of rough it in a little bit?
Yeah, you just got to start off, and if you've got some good ears, then it's a lot easier to do it that way than, I think in a control room, it's better just to come in with a an analyzer, because if you treat a room, you go inside a room like a studio, I mean, depending on where you set everything up, it's going to be different anyway.
Right. As soon as you put the band in there, the whole room
changed
just
anyway.
changed. So really, that's one of the beauties of having baffles and the gobos, is that you can start to bring those in as needed on a session. But I do put in a lot of treatment, but they're always like, packing blankets hanging around or some simple panels.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely hear it make a big difference in terms of, just cutting down some of the echo and the reverb time, and you're making it sound a little less live out there. But I'm not sure if I'm hearing it make a difference in the low end, and I guess it'd be cool to
Well, that's again, you want the attenuation.
A big foam thing. I could set that out there and probably hear.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. You want to get the distance. You want the attenuation over a longer distance.
Yeah.
So, gobos, and, they came around originally back in the 50s and 60s because back in those days, there was no ISO booths.
Right. It was just one
Everybody
big
in a room,
room.
where you broke it all up through using gobos. And it's back down to how we started. The beginning of our conversation here is a first reflection. So when someone sat down, they were playing, usually there was carpet on the floor. And the reason being, and it was a wall carpet, so you didn't build up any static, but it was the very first thing the microphone sees is the closest distance, which is going to be the floor. So that's why they treat it that way. When you go down to Muscle Shoals, you'll see
there's carpet on the floor.
There's carpet on the floor. And that's the reason why, because the separation was through absorption.
Right.
And that's basically, and that it's still a great way to record. You can you're breaking down the distance inside a recording space.
So when we do the Hay Bale studio at Bonnaroo, we hang up, it's not heavy curtains, but it's just, red kind of a, thick ply curtain sheet all on the walls. Then we throw some other, we just got random pieces of Oralex or something that kind of get thrown up in the room, but it does deaden it down, and some carpet on the floor. And I throw some of these Persian rugs down as well. And all that stuff really does help tighten up the sound of that space. And it's remarkable to me that I can get away with so many musicians all in one little spot, and they're not all on top of each other. Yet at the same time, I've recorded a jazz band in here with mics all over. Everybody's on top of each other, no headphones, and it's one of the best recordings I've done.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, it's the people in there, just like filling a theater full of an audience. It completely changes the sound characteristics of that theater.
You have that absorption and diffusion just by the physical, the people being in there and the instrumentation inside there.
Yeah, and any live sound engineer will, talk about the struggles of feedback, happening with or without a whole room full of people. And then you got temperature stuff too. But I guess in a studio, the temperature tends to stay a little bit more uniform. So I don't know if that plays into your considerations. Well, of course, you and I turned off the AC for this interview, so it's getting a little bit warmer in here, but not too bad.
Not too bad. I'd say, to your audience, check out, Chris Stapleton's Sonic Dome, the great big Sonic thing we built. You'll see quite a lot on YouTube, and it'll give you a good idea, maybe more of a visual feel of what you want to strive for inside a recording space. I mean,
and that's the Sonic Dome?
Yeah.
All right, cool. We'll look for it in Rockstars. I'll try and add that into the YouTube playlist as well. Let me ask you this question. So one of the struggles I run into sometimes is recording upright bass. I find it to be an incredibly challenging instrument to record, and probably because I'm often recording it in, it gets relegated to the smaller room. The drums got the big room on the recording, and the upright has to kind of like squeeze into this thing like my kitchen ISO here. What tips do you have? Are there any things that would help me get more clarity out of the upright bass in a small space like that? Should I just bring like a loosely jumbled pile of heavy blankets and throw it in there?
Yeah, I mean, you just want to get the shortest signal path from the microphone to the instrument.
Yeah, just get the mic close to it. Right?
I think that's the only thing you can do. Not unless you can have something that's dedicated. It's hard to correct that, really. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll hear the reflections, the mids I'll hear bouncing from the instrument off the wall back into the mic. The lows they're just in there and they're not going anywhere. I guess unless something pretty thick can kind of soak them up a little bit.
And that's because that instrument has such a broad spectrum.
Right, I know. Such a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Oh, have you ever designed or discovered any spaces that really seemed ideal for upright bass?
I can't say off the top of my head. You know,
you've probably been responsible for it. And just didn't know
I
it
tell
yet.
you, probably the most odd room I ever worked on. It was in a place called Czech Park in Switzerland, and you know, they were, I don't even know the exact style of, but it's Swiss folk music basically, and I had to design an ISO booth for one of the horns that they have, but that horn was 5 meters long, 16 feet long.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's those horns that are designed to, you know, call between the mountain ranges.
That's right. Yeah. That was quite a challenge, I can tell you that.
And so you were designing the studio to be able to record that horn?
Yeah. It was in a booth.
Wow.
It was a long one.
And that's all they're ever going to record in that booth?
I guess so.
That's pretty wild. Yeah, we were talking about that recently, actually. There was I think there's like, I know, it was the summer I was talking to a guy and he was telling me the history of some of the music in, you know, Bulgaria and Hungary and, you know, that kind of Middle Eastern, heading into the Middle Eastern regions. And he talked about those giant horns and he had a name for them. And I know there's some like giant, magnificent bagpipe bass horns and things like that too. In fact, when I first started the podcast, there was a woman who was studying engineering and she sent in one of her recordings, and I swear to God, it was one of the coolest things I've ever heard. And I apologize if you're listening now. I apologize for not having your name off the top of my tongue, but it was like she was Bulgarian, and it was a band performing on a stage, and it was all these big bass bagpipes, and I swear it sounded like folk music meets dubstep. It was just such a cool town. How about designing a studio for Mutt Lange? Do you have any stories you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, I actually built that for him. Tom done the acoustic design there. But yeah, I'll tell you, Mutt Lange, you know, there's several people that you meet in your life that you just know they're so different. I mean, they've just got it. You know, Mutt Lange, I'll get back to him. Like Mutt, I'll tell you. Taylor Swift, absolutely. My friend Ryan Tedder with One Republic. They all have this common denominator of being unbelievably focused. You know, you're at the top of your game and you're still as hungry as what you were the very first day. Like working with Mutt, I'd heard so many different things. There were session musicians that friends of mine that played with them. They found it, you know, some really enjoyed it, some find it exhausting with his style. But for me, as an individual, and believe me, when I was going out to build his place in Switzerland, you know, it was one of the few places I was like, God, I don't know how this is going to end up.
Now, was it in Switzerland? Was it actually at a high elevation as well or not?
No, it was actually down, it went far, you know, I think it was most probably around 500 meters, not that high, to be honest, just above Lake Geneva in Tou de Pays. And, you know, but it's like anything else. When you work with people and they really know what they want, for me, that makes my life a lot easier. Where some people are going to be, you know, they want more improv or, you know, I just try to, you know, listen to what the client needs and then execute it and make them part of it, you know, so they're really involved in the whole process. Now, not everybody's like that. I mean, a lot of clients come to me and say, hey, I want you to build Studio F for me at my house in, you know, such and such, or this room here. You know, a lot of people are like that. They like to get so attached to, you know, a space that you've done that's exactly what they want.
They just want, I want what I saw at Blackbird
that's what I want.
In my backyard. Yeah,
that's what exactly it. That's what, and that's pretty common too. But some people, like I said, they're really in it and they're really into the whole process, and they end up getting pretty well educated before you show up. And
Yeah.
It's like anything great. Most things in life that are brilliant, it's a collaboration.
Right.
I've
found that for myself.
Yeah,
The best
it's
work
the way
I've
it
ever done
goes.
has been a great collaboration.
It's like when everyone's in there, and and that's to me, my business, has been completely built on trust, and from a base of getting different clients, completely has been word of mouth.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking when you were talking about that before too, the connection between producing records and building a studio for somebody is that initial process of just getting to know who your client is and what their needs are, and really like communicating with them so that you understand, you let them tell you what it is you need to do, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You just have to be a good listener.
Yeah, you can be a good listener. That's why I tell everyone at Blackbird Academy, listen to your mum. She's right. I'm telling you. She'll give you the best advice.
That's great. Yeah.
I mean, because the truth is, there's so many talented people out there, there's, in the work that I do, although there's not a whole lot of us around, to be honest, but, they're all talented people. And then it comes down to, who can work with.
Right.
These people can hire anybody, but it's like, who do you have that connection with? It's very, very, it's very important. And that a lot of it comes down to listening.
Connections are funny too, because I think sometimes you have a connection immediately with people, and sometimes it takes a minute. You can have a connection, but it takes a minute to settle in, too.
Yeah. Here's some other stuff that we've been doing. I've really enjoyed it. Is some nightclubs. We just finished a really beautiful club here in town, and people can look it up online. It's at the Hutton Hotel, and it's called Analog. It's a nightclub we've done there.
Cool. Right here. At the Gulch here in Nashville.
Yeah, well, this is on West End at the Hutton Hotel. It's a performance room, and also we put in 2 studios inside the hotel. So artists coming in from around the country playing here, they can go have writing sessions there, record there. I've enjoyed that, and actually a lot of live venues. I've enjoyed that side of it, because so many more other people get to enjoy the experience.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Where, typically, it's like, I often see my work like a famous painter. We go in, we create something, and someone pays us for it, and we never see it again. That's it. That's it. It's over. When you work with people, and it's, it's so private that there
was a coffee machine
there
because I fixed one during the break.
But it is great. That's what I enjoy that part of it, though. You know what I mean? Because it's theirs and away it goes.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the ability to let go of something in the creative process. In fact, it was one of the first things I did with my friend Chris King when we were driving around the country doing field recordings, and we met up with Leo Cannellan, who was the poet laureate of Connecticut, and we recorded his poems, him reciting his poems, these incredible stuff. Crossing America was the stuff he was doing, and that was the name of the poem. And then we took those recordings and wanted to sort of either add music to it or write our own songs around it and recompose this into a new music meets poetry piece. And to make a long story short, it was a moment where he could have felt offended by what we were doing, but he said these words, which I thought were really insightful. He just said, once I'm done with it and I put it out there, it's not mine anymore. Mm-hmm. Like I let go of it. That's and now it belongs to the world, and you're going to do, I don't have any control over what you're going to do with it. And I think that's a really good part of the creative process is to come quickly to terms with that and be able to let go,
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Well, I got a couple of closing questions, but before I go, is there anything we didn't cover, or do you maybe have a story about one of the strangest, details or something for a studio that you had to learn from the client and include in it to make the studio really a great working space? And maybe you can keep the names, anonymous if you want to.
Yeah, I don't know, really. That's a tough one because they really are, they're all similar in certain functions and unique because they're individual to the client, and it gets really personal of how they are. You know, it's like when you're working with them, you know, you think you're there, and when they've got up in the morning and they've got a dressing gown on or pajamas on or whatever they wear, and, you know, you're in there working, and you really get a different connection from somebody, you know. So it's not so, I don't know, it's unique. It's just more extremely personal.
Right.
And it's
and
unique.
I imagine if they're unique requests, like, I mean, you look at my control room, I have this console there. Then on this side, there are these tall racks. On that side's a funny rack and a couple of tape machines. And it's not really symmetrical. There's 2 panels over here. There's a window over there.
Yeah.
And I imagine you must have clients telling you, well, no, I've got to have this right here in the control room because it's part of how I make music.
The layout, yes, you know, how you know, they're left-handed, they're right-handed, things like that. But, you know, some of the, I think, really unique stuff that I've done, because they're great clients, again, and one of them is a very dear friend of mine, spoke to him on the way over here, is John McBride.
Yeah.
And, you know, John, you know, he trusted me in building his facility at Blackbird, which I think is one of the premier places in the world, let alone just in the country.
Yeah.
But, you know, some of the chambers that I'd done there, the reverb chambers.
Oh, yeah, with the moving walls and all that stuff.
And the moving ceilings. And there's a massive amount of weight, huge amount of mass in those areas. You know, that the engineering that went in there.
So that ceiling that's going up and down above my head that is so cool looking.
Yeah, that weighs most probably about 800 pounds.
Yeah, if it drops on me, that's that gorilla again, right on my head.
Yeah, and there's a guy, Brad, from a company here, Setco, who's done a lot of work with, he does a lot of set design and, again, a collaboration of, okay, this is what I want to do. This is the finishes. This is the mass. And then this is the chamber we're putting it in, and being able to change the RT time and the, you know, the decay time in that room, and it have such a broad spectrum of frequencies is pretty phenomenal. It's very unique, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's been a lot of reverb chambers, but there's not many like that one in the world, I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's cool. I've always wanted to build an echo chamber here. So Rockstars, if you're not familiar with how an echo chamber works, essentially, and I'll say it and then you can correct me, but essentially you've got a highly reflective room with typically very solid walls, I think, so that it's reflecting all the frequency spectrum back. It's bouncing around. It basically like a room that's like being inside an empty swimming pool.
Yep.
And then you put a speaker in there or a pair of speakers, then you put a mic in there or a pair of mics, and you just play music through it and record them back in the mics, and then you get this reverberant sound you can mix in with your music.
Yep.
Everybody's listening. They're like, Lidge, come on, dude. We all got plugins that do that. What are you talking about? Come on.
Another thing I really like is in Studio A at Blackbird. It's actually where that reverb chamber is as well, is we put up a truss system. So all of the microphones...
You said it was all about truss. Right?
That's right. But this is a ceiling truss. So, you know, where you could clamp on all the microphones. So there's nothing coming off the floor. So, you know, there's no transmission through any of the amplification or anything going up the mic stand into the microphone. That it, you know, all of these, there's like, I think 6 bars that you know, go from the floor all the way to the ceiling, and it's a great, unique.
Right. So this means you could hang a mic or suspend a mic from this bar down to a position, and it's not the like you said, the amp is not rumbling through the floor and coming up through the, you know, even such a well-designed floor that, although I guess typically a floor is isolated from the other outside spaces, but not from the inside. 5 feet across in this very same room.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, have you, this would be a really interesting experiment to put the same mic up in the same, you know, right next to each other, one on a stand and one hanging from this thing, and, you know, mic up an amp and really hear that difference too.
Yeah.
I guess it would just be the low lows.
Yeah. So once the slab accentuates.
By the way, that's going to be, that's the name of my band when I form one, the Low Lows. Unless there's already one. There's already a band out there with every name. Cool, man. I don't want to stop. I mean, it's just so much good stuff. Was there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to cover? Any particular artists or projects that you're thrilled about at the moment?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I do look at, I mean, there's different things through my life. You know, I've been doing this a long time that are very personal, you know, for different things like working in BOP and actually working in Russia working out in China on different projects. But really, the best projects I'm working on is always the current project to me, because everybody is as important. Everybody's on the ladder somewhere.
And,
it doesn't matter.
You're never going to see BOP again anyway. So come on
so it's all down to really, enjoying it, what you're doing right now. To me, that's really that's why I try to live by.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question that's pretty important to all of us as we spend decades doing this. How do you like to balance health and work?
I'm pretty good at that, I'll be honest with you. Maybe not so much in my younger days because I was working internationally so much.
Yeah, but you were holding a hammer back then.
Yeah, that's right. And you're there and you got, you can't, no one's going to send me to China and say, work 7 hours a day. It doesn't work like that. So, right. But no, I mean, I do. I mean, here in town, I've got, family, wife, kids. Well, all the kids are at college. They're here now, but most of them, but at colleges. I work out every day and, I switch off, and say, okay, that, from here to here, that's my time.
Right.
And then sometimes, obviously, you got to crank it up, but try to put that balance, in front because, it's very hard to be productive when you're tired,
Yeah, definitely.
It doesn't really work. And it just doesn't work for me that way. I get, going to get stuck in the weeds. It's better, I like, to me, rock climb or play racquetball and
nice. So you're a rock climber.
Yeah, I was for years. And again, being dyslexic, when you rock climb, it's a sequence of numbers. So I've done that for years. I'm still, getting back into it again. And, but I play a lot of racquetball, because I can go in and switch off.
Yeah.
And that's important, It's important for, work, important for your personal life and.
Well, I find also that the converse is true, or the inverse, whichever one it is. But when you know when you're going to be done working, it means that you know when you're going to be working, and it helps you switch on.
That's right. Yeah.
So you just know it's like going to work. I'll be done at this time. Then I'll do this other thing.
You get a lot less sleepless nights.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when you're in it, you're in it. I mean, my mind's spinning all the time. But having exercise and eating well, a few glasses of wine. That won't kill you.
Any thoughts about where you think music is headed and the medium of recorded music being played back for us to hear it?
I mean, I really, I think it's great, to be honest. I can only relate it to my business. I can look at the history where, a lot of the 80s, the music scene was so dead. It was so electronic and so fake to me, and end up, living in Nashville,
Yeah, but you also loved it, right?
Yeah, of course I did. Yeah, when I was 21
Are you an
years
EDM
old.
fan now? Do you like dubstep and all these
Yeah,
things?
Yeah.
Nice, man. We got to hang out sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, funny enough, I collect a lot of vinyl, and I just bought 500 albums on this auction that are all electronic mixes, you know what I mean, from the 80s. But, I'm very optimistic and very happy with the way things are now. They got to sort out the royalties for the writers and stuff like that. But from a live music scene, it's pretty hard to beat what's going on now.
Right. There's people out there. Shows and a lot of great live shows, a lot of great sounding.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's expanded into a different format. People still love to see great players playing great songs, and recording them in great studios. We're busier than we've ever been. It's been great. And hope to keep going for another few more years. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's like anything else. It's out there. Go get it.
Yeah. I imagine that you've seen, you talked about 2.1, 5.1. You talked about all these different formats. So I guess you've already experienced your own ability to evolve, still bring the same kind of design mentality to what you do, but evolve with what the technology is doing. And, now it didn't used to be this way, but now, of course, you have a giant flat screen on the front wall between the speakers, probably in almost every studio.
And the technology from monitoring, what something was 20 years ago is half the size and a fraction of the cost. Yeah. When I got into building studios, 32 years ago, the rooms that we were doing, the construction costs still expensive because they were large rooms, but the equipment costs were astronomical. People, even 30 years ago, were paying $1 million for a console, which is insane when you think of it.
Right.
This massive...
Just think of all the plugins you could have bought
That's
with
right,
that.
yeah. But, you're building these consoles, you're putting these consoles in there 15, 16 feet long. Now, you've got to put that inside a control room, so your control rooms are now 25 feet wide, and then when you're 25 feet wide, you've got to make it 32 foot deep.
Right.
And so these massive structures where now, the equipment is, it's still expensive, but it's not a significant cost to most people because, the technology has really helped that way.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this about consoles versus, now with digital stuff, we have the ability to have a tiny little table there
It's brilliant.
if we want. So generally speaking, is it going to be easier to fine tune the monitoring without having a big work surface?
Absolutely, yeah, because the smaller the footprint, what's in front of you, sonically, the better the room will deal with because, you have, like, for example, where we are, you have something that's 4 foot deep. It's probably 7 foot long in a room that is 14 foot wide.
Oh, Michael, are you referring to my console over there, aka the Hitmaker?
The Hitmaker, that's it. So, it just has that, the footprint is important. So, yeah, the smaller it gets, the better off everything is.
Yeah, right on. All right, well, Hitmaker, it may be time for us to repackage you or something or move you to the next room. I don't know. But I do think about that a lot. And I think about, sort of my studio, like many people's, has evolved into what it is. It's a collaboration of a lot of different elements of gear and people and stuff. And, but I think about like, what if I could just kind of do it? And I was really just focused on mixing with the computer and setting my monitors just right. What would that room feel like to me? And I think I'm kind of excited about that, the ability to be able to mix in an environment where it's like it really sounds unimpeded.
Yes, yeah, sure. But,
stuff.
the other thing is you're not going to get a plug-in to sound like that console. So
no,
that's the other
really.
side of it. So, every place, every
probably come
piece
up
of
with a
technology has its place, but it's not really going to replace not this certain styles of recording. It's not going to do that.
I was going to say, maybe they'll come up with a plugin to replace me before they come up with one to replace the console. And not to go on a tangent, but I'm really excited about the future of not having to click with a mouse and a keyboard.
Yes.
I want to put on, I don't know if I need to put on virtual glasses or something, but I want to spend all day, moving around. Like, if you looked in the window, it looked like I was doing some weird modern dance. But that equals mixing music all day. Because I think that would be a cool way to, for the next generation to spend 20, 30 years making records.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know what's out there. That's a beautiful part of it.
Yeah, indeed. Well, so let me go to the closing question here. This one's hypothetical. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, Michael. And you get to go back in time and maybe you're going back to the church back in the 80s, or maybe it's earlier than that. But you're going to go back and find young Michael and walk up behind you, tap yourself on the shoulder. You turn, what are you doing here? With the smiley sun T-shirt on.
That's right.
You got a cool shirt on today. And you say, well, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself?
Well, I'll give you, I don't know if it's a direct analogy, but I did actually get to tap on someone's shoulder a couple of years ago.
I did actually take a time machine once.
You know what? I was...
with Mutt Lange.
Well, it's not far from there. I was working here with Virgin Hotels on a project, and I was with the head of Virgin Music, and we went over to Blackbird Studios, and I'm in there, and I knew that Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics, he spent a lot of time in Nashville. He actually came to record an album here at Blackbird the very first time and ended up writing another album called The Stories of Blackbird, and he's come back here ever since. So I was there, and I was meeting with John McBride, the owner, and he said, well, Dave's here. So Dave Stewart came out, and I said, Dave, I doubt that you remember me, but, 34 years ago from now, it was 32 years when I met him 2 years ago, you changed my life because, you hired me and I built that studio for you, and I got hired by another individual, Tom Hidley, and I went on and on and on. And, he had said, well, what studios have you done? I said, the one you're standing in. And that is Dave's greatest studio. So for me, it was like, that really was a poignant moment.
That is pretty cool, man.
Yeah, to be able to thank him.
I bet Dave was including you in the description of his bio for the past 20 years
sure,
too.
Yeah. I think he just misspelled my name. But no, I mean, I think the same thing. Like, if I go back, it's really down to, listen, and absorb everything that you can, because that's really what's going to create your future. Be inquisitive, but there's a fine line between being a pain in the ass in a studio and being inquisitive, because, the thing is, in a studio environment, it's great. And, when you watch everything on TV, it looks like, a bunch of hippies out there having a big old time. But it's not like that. It's so stressful. I mean, everything is expensive. The players are expensive. The rooms are expensive. The equipment's expensive.
Totally.
The instruments are expensive, and the time's expensive. So,
and everybody's trying really hard to solve a difficult problem.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone wants to be on their game and be as good as they can be. And so, I think the best advice I can give to people is like, listen and learn.
And also remember to answer the phone, because that's how you got that first gig for the church, right?
That's right.
Always
be ready and go for it. Don't ever be afraid to make mistakes. Just go and just be honest, and it works out.
I think it's cool too that you essentially did continue the family business.
Yeah.
But it transitioned to this other thing too that might have sounded like two very different worlds.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes, we forget that we can come from one place, do something that's kind of very different, but it all flows.
It all flows the same. You try to do things better, more cost effectively for people. And to me, I always want to improve, even, my inner self.
Yeah. Well, right on. Well, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us and helping us all improve our studios around the world. It's an absolute pleasure to hang with you, Michael. Can you let the Rockstars know how they can find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, just go to my name's Michael Cronin. Cronin spelled Cronin. I'm based here in Nashville, Tennessee. You can go to my website, which is michaelcroninacoustic.com. That's michaelcroninacoustic.com. And, there's a place there that you can contact me, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take it easy. Take care.
Can't wait to see what those studios will look like. Great to have you in the studio, and I look forward to seeing more of you around Nashville and around the studios, around the world, I guess.
That's it.
All right. Cheers, man.
Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.